Mary Parker had just set the last fork down when Vanessa snapped her fingers. "Wine, please," she said without looking up from her phone. "And not the cheap stuff." She was sitting in Mary's chair again, elbow perched, legs crossed like she owned the air in the room. The wine bottle was on the counter, chilled and ready. Mary's hand hovered over it. For years, she would have poured it without a word. She'd done it at baby showers for Vanessa's friends, birthdays, even on ordinary days when no thank you ever came her way. But something inside Mary shifted in that moment. "No," she said. It came out small, but solid. Vanessa's eyes lifted, sharp and amused. "Excuse me?" "You've got hands," Mary said, surprising herself with each word. "A voice, even. You can pour it yourself." The air turned dense. Jackson looked up from his plate, startled. He blinked like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Then, without a word, he grabbed the salad bowl, ceramic, heavy white with a blue rim, and hurled it straight at Mary. The impact was swift and loud. The bowl shattered against Mary's cheekbone, a sharp sting followed by warmth trickling down her face. She didn't scream. She didn't fall. She just touched her cheek, looked at the blood on her fingertips, and exhaled. Vanessa smirked. Servants should know their duties. Jackson didn't say a word. He sat back down, picked up his fork, and dug into his plate like nothing had happened. Mary walked to the sink, picked up a napkin, and pressed it to her cheek. The tile under her feet felt cold, steadier than anything else in the room. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She sat back down at the far end of the table, napkin soaking through with blood. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. The silence around her didn't crush her this time. It cleared a space she hadn't touched in years. Upstairs, Mary knew there were bandages in the linen drawer. She moved up the stairs slowly, her palm pressed to the cut, the napkin already soaked through. In her bathroom, she closed the door with a soft click and slid the lock into place. Only then did her hands begin to shake. The mirror above her sink caught her off guard. A thin crimson line ran down her cheek, the edge already swelling. She turned the faucet on and let the water run until it cooled. With slow, steady movements, she cleaned the cut, watching the diluted pink swirl down the drain. Vanessa's laugh drifted up through the vent, light and careless like nothing had happened. Jackson's footsteps came later, heavier, hesitant. A knock, once, then again harder. "Mom, open up. I didn't mean... Look, I'm sorry." His voice was muffled, edged with a nervous tremor. Mary pressed her ear to the wood but stayed still. Another knock. "Please just talk to me." Mary stepped back, the towel still in her hand. Her silence stretched between them, thicker than his apology. His footsteps retreated, then faded altogether. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, pulled her phone from her pocket, and opened the camera. The flash popped once, twice, 3 times, each click a small anchor. Bruised, cut, blood on her fingers, evidence, proof. She saved them all to a hidden folder. Then she remembered the security cameras William had insisted on installing after a break-in 2 houses down about a decade ago. Mary hadn't checked the system in years, but she knew Jackson had updated it recently, claiming it was for her protection. She moved to her bedroom, locking that door too, and opened her laptop. The security app was still there. She scanned through the footage, rewinding to dinner time. The dining room camera caught it all in stark clarity. Jackson's arm, the bowl, her face, Vanessa's smile. Mary downloaded the video to a thumb drive and slid it into a small tin box she'd hidden in the back of her closet. A box no one else ever touched, containing old keys, her original wedding band that had become too tight, and a small stack of business cards. The top card, worn at the edges but still legible, read Elizabeth Miller, handcrafted with heart. Elizabeth had run a small craft co-op on Maple Street years ago when Mary still had her own business. Below the business name, in smaller print, Director, Women's Resource Center. Mary's head throbbed. The pain radiated from her cheekbone across her temple. She carefully applied antiseptic and butterfly bandages from her first aid kit. The cut needed stitches, but she couldn't face those questions tonight. She swallowed 2 pain relievers and lay down carefully, positioning her head to keep pressure off the wound. As she lay there, Mary started making mental notes. The security footage, the photos, the date and time, details she would need to remember. Mary woke before dawn, her cheek throbbing. In the dim light, she examined her face. The bruising had darkened to a deep purple, spreading across her cheekbone and under her eye. The cut itself looked angry and swollen. She opened her drawer and pulled out an old compact of foundation she rarely used anymore. Carefully, she covered the worst of the bruising, wincing at the pressure. As she worked, Mary's mind drifted back to William. He would never have raised a hand to her. In 36 years of marriage, violence was never a possibility. William had been her biggest cheerleader when she started her card business, converting the sunroom into a studio, proudly telling everyone his wife was an artist. "You've got magic in those hands, Mary," he used to say. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." When had she stopped believing that? When had she become this shadow, this servant in her own home? Mary finished with the makeup and went to her closet. Behind her winter sweaters, she kept a small fireproof box. Inside were important documents: birth certificates, their marriage license, his life insurance policy, and the deed to the house. The deed. Mary held it in trembling hands, reading the names printed clearly at the top: William J. Parker and Mary E. Parker. After William died, she'd transferred it fully to her name. The house belonged to her. Only her. Not Jackson. Not Vanessa. Why had she let them act as though she lived under their roof? Why had she let them dictate the rules in her own home? As she replaced the document, Mary noticed an old journal tucked into the box. Toward the back, she found her own handwriting, entries from after William's death. One entry, dated just weeks after Jackson announced his engagement to Vanessa, caught her eye. "Met Vanessa's ex-boyfriend today by chance. Michael seemed surprised when I mentioned the engagement. Said something odd. I hope your son has a better experience than I did." When I asked what he meant, he got uncomfortable and left. Something feels off about her, but Jackson seems so happy. Mary had forgotten about that strange encounter. She'd dismissed her concerns, wanting her son to be happy after his father's death. But now she wondered if she should have paid more attention to that uneasy feeling. She flipped through more recent entries, noting the gradual change in Jackson. The son who had once called daily after his father's death now only appeared for meals or when he needed something. The kind, if sometimes short-tempered young man had become increasingly dismissive, deferring to Vanessa in all things. Mary hadn't seen it happening, or hadn't wanted to see it. Like a photograph fading so gradually you don't notice until the image is barely there. She went to her dresser and opened the bottom drawer. Beneath old sweaters, wrapped in tissue paper, lay the tools of her former craft. Her embossing stylus, specialty scissors, bone folder, and fine papers. She hadn't touched them in years, not since Vanessa had commented that hobby crafts cluttered the house, and suggested she find something less messy to occupy her time. Mary had packed everything away, letting her small business die without even a proper funeral. A soft knock at her bedroom door made her quickly rewrap the tools and close the drawer. "Mom?" Jackson's voice came through, tentative. "Are you awake? Can we talk?" Mary took a deep breath, arranged her hair to partially cover her bruised cheek, and opened the door. Jackson stood in the hallway, dressed for work in a crisp suit, looking impossibly like his father, and nothing like him at the same time. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her face, despite her efforts to conceal the damage. "Jesus, Mom, He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what came over me last night. I've been under a lot of pressure at work, and I need to start breakfast," Mary interrupted, moving past him toward the stairs. "You'll be late for work." "Mom, wait." But Mary was already descending the stairs, her back straight, her steps measured. In the kitchen, she began her routine: coffee brewing, eggs whisked, bread in the toaster. Mary set the plates on the table just as Vanessa entered the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up briefly, her eyes catching on Mary's bruised face before sliding away without comment. "The toast is a little dark," she said, taking her seat. "Sorry," Mary replied automatically, the word slipping out before she could catch it. Jackson came in moments later, his expression carefully neutral. An awkward silence stretched between them, broken only by the scrape of utensils against plates. "I'll be late tonight," Jackson finally said. "Board meeting." "And I'm meeting the girls for drinks," Vanessa added, still focused on her phone. "Don't wait up." After they left, Jackson with a hesitant pat on her shoulder, Vanessa without a backward glance, Mary moved quickly. She retrieved Elizabeth's card from her box and dialed the number, praying it was still in service. To her surprise, Elizabeth answered on the third ring. "Elizabeth? It's Mary. Mary Parker." "Mary, my goodness, it's been years. How are you?" The simple question nearly undid her. How was she? Bruised, frightened, ashamed, angry. "I need some advice, Elizabeth, about the Women's Resource Center." "Are you safe right now, Mary?" "Yes, for the moment. I'm alone in the house." "Can you come to the center? I'm there today until 5. Mary glanced at the clock. "I'll be there by 11. She packed a change of clothes, her toiletry bag, the thumb drive with the security footage, and her folder of important documents. After a moment's hesitation, she added her card-making tools and a small stack of her finest papers. She called a taxi rather than using the ride-share app on her phone that Jackson had set up, too easy to track. While waiting, she logged into her banking app and transferred a significant portion of her savings to a new account at a different bank. The Women's Resource Center occupied a modest building on Oak Street. A discreet sign by the door simply read WRC with the logo of a rising sun. The reception area was warm and inviting. Comfortable couches, soft lighting, artwork by local female artists. A young woman at the front desk looked up with a welcoming smile that didn't falter when she noticed Mary's bruised face. "I'm here to see Elizabeth Miller," Mary said quietly. Moments later, Elizabeth appeared. At 67, she remained as Mary remembered her. Silver hair cut in a stylish bob, bright eyes behind colorful glasses, an artist's eye for color evident in her layered clothing. "Mary," she said simply, opening her arms. Mary hadn't realized how badly she needed a hug until she felt Elizabeth's arms around her. She stiffened at first. When was the last time someone had hugged her? Then melted into the embrace, careful of her injured cheek. "Come to my office," Elizabeth said. "We can talk privately there." Mary told her everything: the dinner, the bowl, the history of small cruelties that had become her normal. Elizabeth listened, her expression calm, though Mary could see the anger in her eyes. "Have you seen a doctor? That cut looks deep." Mary shook her head. "I couldn't face the questions." Elizabeth arranged for a staff nurse to examine Mary. Heather confirmed a mild concussion, cleaned the cut, and applied fresh bandages. "What do you want to do now, Mary?" Elizabeth asked after the nurse left. The question caught her off guard. What did she want? No one had asked her that in so long. "I don't want to go back there tonight," she said finally, "but I don't know where else to go. I have a small apartment above my craft shop. It's just a studio. but it's private and available. You're welcome to stay there." Mary felt tears well up. "I couldn't impose." "It's not imposing. And frankly, I could use your help at the shop. Your cards, Mary. Your artwork. I remember how beautiful they were." Mary felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. The idea that her hands could still create something of value, that someone still believed in her skill. That night, in the small studio apartment above Elizabeth's craft shop, Mary stood by the window watching the streetlights come on. The space was simple. A pull-out sofa, a kitchenette, a small bathroom, but it felt like a sanctuary. Her phone had been buzzing with texts from Jackson all afternoon. "Where are you? Mom, answer your phone. Are you trying to worry me on purpose?" His latest message stung. "What friend? You don't have friends." Those words were almost true. She had let her friendships wither over the years, too busy caring for everyone but herself. As darkness fell, Mary felt the first nightmare begin while still awake. Heart racing, palms sweating, the phantom sensation of something hard striking her face. This was trauma, she realized, the body remembering what the mind wanted to forget. She opened her tote bag and took out her card-making tools, laying them carefully on the small table. The familiar shapes comforted her. She ran her fingers over them, remembering techniques and designs she'd once known by heart. Tomorrow she would begin planning in earnest. Consult with a lawyer, see a doctor about her concussion, think about her future. But tonight, she would reconnect with the part of herself she'd packed away years ago. Mary selected a sheet of cream-colored cardstock and began to fold. Morning came with a soft glow through the curtains. Mary had slept better than expected, though her dreams were fragmented with images of shattered ceramics and William's disappointed face. She checked her phone. 6 more messages from Jackson, increasingly agitated. "This is ridiculous. I've called everyone we know. Are you trying to punish me? It was an accident. If you don't come home today, I'm filing a missing persons report." Mary turned the phone off and set it aside. She couldn't deal with his manipulations right now. Over breakfast, Elizabeth outlined the day ahead. An appointment with Sophia Washington, the lawyer, followed by a session with Dr. Amara Thompson, the trauma counselor. "Are you sure about this?" Mary asked, anxiety knotting her stomach. "Maybe I'm overreacting. It was just one incident." "Not." Elizabeth's gaze was direct. "Was it? Think back, Mary. The isolation, the control, the way they've treated you in your own home. These are warning signs, not isolated incidents." Mary thought of the countless small erosions of her autonomy, Jackson taking over her finances to help, Vanessa rearranging her kitchen without asking, the gradual disappearance of her friends from her life. She thought of her card-making business, once her pride and joy, now dismissed as a messy hobby. "There were signs," she admitted quietly. "I just didn't want to see them." "Most people don't," Elizabeth said gently, "especially when it's family. The people who are supposed to love us the most can sometimes hurt us the deepest." Mary nodded, fingering the bruise on her cheek. "What if they're right? What if I am overreacting?" "Taking steps to protect yourself is never an overreaction," Elizabeth said firmly. "And remember, getting advice doesn't commit you to any particular course of action. It just gives you options." Options! Mary turned the word over in her mind. How long had it been since she'd truly had options? Since she'd made decisions based on her own needs, rather than everyone else's. As they prepared to leave, Mary glanced at the card she'd made the night before. Simple, elegant, with a delicate embossed border. Inside, in her careful calligraphy, she'd written words that had come to her in the night. Sometimes strength begins with saying no. She tucked the card into her purse, a small talisman of the woman she was beginning to remember, the woman she had been before she became invisible, the woman she might become again. Morning came with a clarity Mary hadn't experienced in years. The bruise on her cheek had darkened to a deep purple, but the pain felt distant now, overshadowed by a growing resolve. She stood at the kitchenette counter, sipping coffee and watching the street below come alive. Her phone buzzed again, the 15th time since dawn. Jackson. His messages had evolved from demanding to pleading overnight. "Mom, please just tell me where you are." "I'm worried about you. You're not thinking clearly." Mary set the phone down without responding. After years of making herself constantly available, her absence had finally made her son pay attention. Elizabeth entered carrying a tray of pastries and fresh coffee. "Thought you might like breakfast," she said. "And this." She handed Mary a business card. "Sophia Washington. She's expecting us at 10. "I don't know if I need a lawyer," Mary said hesitantly. "I just need time to think." "Mary, your son threw a bowl at your face hard enough to concuss you, and they've been systematically isolating you for years. At minimum, you need legal advice to protect yourself and your assets." Put so plainly, Mary couldn't argue. "You're right. It's just difficult to think of it that way. He's my son." "Which makes this harder, not less serious," Elizabeth said gently. "After we meet with Sophia, I've arranged for you to see Dr. Amara Thompson. She specializes in trauma counseling." 2 hours later, Mary sat in Sophia Washington's office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows. Sophia herself was a striking woman in her mid-40s, with close-cropped natural hair and penetrating eyes. "Ms. Parker, I understand how difficult this must be, especially since the perpetrator is your son." Mary winced at the word perpetrator, but didn't correct her. "I'd like to understand what you want to achieve," Sophia continued. "Protection? Financial security? A restraining order? I just want to be safe, and to keep my home." "Then let's start there. You mentioned you have evidence of the assault?" Mary nodded, retrieving her phone and the thumb drive. "Photos of my injuries and security camera footage of the incident." Sophia's expression remained professionally neutral as she viewed the evidence, but her jaw tightened slightly. "This is compelling documentation," she said finally. "And your son and daughter-in-law have been attempting to gain control of your finances and property?" "Yes. I found draft papers in Jackson's office for transferring ownership of my house to their names." Her voice faltered. "And I overheard them discussing having me declared incompetent and placed in assisted living." Sophia's pen paused. "That's a serious escalation. Has your son ever been violent before?" Mary started to shake her head, then stopped. "Not physically, but there have been incidents. Times he's lost his temper, broken things, intimidated me. And your daughter-in-law? Vanessa is more subtle. She doesn't raise her voice or break things. She just diminishes, makes me feel invisible, useless." Mary twisted her ring. "I used to run my own small business making handcrafted cards. After William died and Vanessa came into our lives, somehow that became cluttering the house and a messy hobby." "Classic isolation tactics," Sophia noted, "separating you from activities that gave you independence and self-worth." She set down her pen. "Ms. Parker, based on what you've told me, I recommend immediate legal steps to protect you and your property." She outlined a plan: filing for a temporary restraining order, securing Mary's financial accounts, and preparing a cease and desist letter regarding any attempts to have her declared incompetent. "What about my house?" Mary asked. "Can they force me out somehow?" "Not if the deed is solely in your name," Sophia assured her. "But I recommend you stay elsewhere until the restraining order is in place." "Do they have keys?" Mary nodded. Then we should arrange to have the locks changed once the order is granted. The reality hit Mary with sudden force. She was 65 years old and essentially homeless, hiding from her only child. A wave of dizziness washed over her. "Ms. Parker? Are you all right?" "I just need a moment," Mary whispered. Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "It's overwhelming, I know, but you're not alone in this." Mary took a deep breath. "What happens next?" "We filed today," Sophia said. "With your evidence, I expect the temporary order within 48 hours. There will be a hearing in approximately 2 weeks to determine if it should be made permanent." "And Jackson, will he be arrested?" Sophia's expression softened. "That depends on whether you wish to press criminal charges. The restraining order is civil. Criminal charges would be separate." Mary's stomach knotted at the thought of her son in handcuffs. "Just the restraining order for now," she said quietly. "That's entirely your decision," Sophia assured her. Their next stop was a modest building near the community college, where Dr. Amara Thompson maintained her practice. Unlike Sophia's sleek office, Amara's space felt like a comfortable living room, soft lighting, plants in every corner, and local artwork on the walls. Amara herself was a serene presence, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes. "Mary," she said warmly, taking both her hands, "I'm so glad you've come." Something about Amara's gentle manner broke through Mary's carefully maintained composure. To her own surprise, she began to cry, quiet tears at first, then deep, racking sobs. Amara simply held space, offering tissues and quiet understanding until the storm passed. "I'm sorry," Mary said finally. "I don't know what came over me." "Your body is processing trauma," Amara explained. "Tears are part of that. So are other symptoms you might be experiencing: anxiety, flashbacks, difficulty sleeping, hypervigilance." Mary nodded, recognizing herself in each description. "Will it always be this way?" "No," Amara said firmly. "With proper support and time, these symptoms will decrease. You've already taken the most important step, removing yourself from danger." Their session continued with Amara explaining trauma response and teaching Mary grounding techniques. By the end, Mary felt exhausted but somehow lighter, as though naming her experiences had diminished their power. "I'd like to see you twice weekly initially," Amara said, "and I recommend our support group for survivors of family violence. Meeting others with similar experiences can be incredibly healing." Back at Elizabeth's shop, Mary found herself drawn to the card-making supplies. Her fingers itched to create something. Elizabeth noticed her interest. "Feel free to use anything here," she offered. "The work table in the corner is all yours." Mary selected cardstock, delicate rice papers, and fine-tipped pens. She lost herself in the familiar motions, measuring, cutting, folding with precision. Hours passed as she worked, creating elegant note cards with embossed edges and watercolor washes. When she finally looked up, the shop was closed and Elizabeth was watching her. "You haven't lost your touch," she commented. "These are beautiful, Mary." "Thank you," Mary said, surprised by how good the simple praise felt. "It's been so long, I wasn't sure I remembered how." "Some things become part of your hands," Elizabeth said. "They don't forget." That evening, as Mary prepared for bed, her phone rang. Not a text this time, but a call from Jackson. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. "Mom?" Jackson's voice mixed relief and irritation. "Finally! Where the hell are you?" "Somewhere safe," Mary replied, her voice steadier than expected. "What does that mean? You can't just disappear. Vanessa and I have been worried sick." "Have you?" Mary asked quietly. "Of course, you're not thinking clearly, Mom. That bump on your head? The bump you gave me when you threw a bowl at my face? Mary interrupted. A pause. I lost my temper. I apologized. But this overreaction isn't like you. You're right, Mary agreed. It isn't like me. The old me would have cleaned up the broken bowl, hidden the bruises, and pretended nothing happened. But I'm not doing that anymore. What are you talking about? Where are you staying? That doesn't concern you right now. What you should know is that I've spoken with an attorney. You'll be served with legal papers soon. Legal papers? What the hell, Mom? You're suing me? His voice rose. I'm protecting myself, Mary corrected. I've filed for a restraining order. A restraining? Mom, you've lost your mind. Is someone influencing you? Putting these crazy ideas in your head? The only crazy idea was thinking I deserved to be treated the way you and Vanessa have treated me. Jackson's tone changed, becoming cajoling. Mom, please. Let's talk face to face. Whatever's bothering you, we can work it out, as a family. We will talk, Mary said. In court, with our attorneys present. This isn't you talking. Goodbye, Jackson. She ended the call, her hand shaking but her resolve intact. Almost immediately, the phone rang again. This time, she turned it off completely. The next morning brought news from Sophia. The temporary restraining order had been granted. Jackson and Vanessa were legally prohibited from contacting Mary or coming within 100 yards of her for the next 14 days, until the hearing. What happens now? Mary asked during their phone conversation. Now we prepare for the hearing, Sophia explained, and we need to discuss your living situation. Are you comfortable staying with Elizabeth temporarily? She's been very kind, but I can't impose indefinitely, Mary replied. I should look for an apartment. I've arranged for a locksmith to change the locks at your house tomorrow. With the restraining order in place, you could safely return home if you wish. Mary considered this. Her house held so many memories, her life with William, raising Jackson, building her business. But it also now held the memory of violence, of betrayal. I think I need more time, she said finally. That's entirely understandable, Sophia assured her. Take whatever time you need. Over the next few days, Mary fell into a rhythm. Mornings with Dr. Thompson, working through complex emotions. Afternoons at Elizabeth's shop, reacquainting herself with her art form. Evenings in the small apartment, gradually making it her own with small touches, fresh flowers, a soft throw, her card-making supplies arranged by the window. She ventured to her first support group meeting with trepidation, convinced her experience wasn't bad enough. She was surprised to find women from all walks of life, with stories both similar to and different from her own. Some had faced physical violence from partners, others emotional abuse from adult children or siblings. A woman named Gloria, elegant in her 70s with perfectly coiffed silver hair, became an unexpected ally. She had escaped financial exploitation by her son and daughter-in-law 2 years earlier. They nearly convinced me I was losing my mind, she confided to Mary. Had me doubting my own memory, my own competence. Classic gaslighting. Took me years to see the pattern. How did you get through it? Mary asked. Gloria smiled, steel behind her genteel exterior. One day at a time, with a good therapist, a better lawyer, and an excellent locksmith. She squeezed Mary's hand. And friends who understood. You're doing the right thing, Mary. Don't let anyone tell you different. Mary's card designs evolved, becoming more confident and expressive. She created a series called Rooted Words, simple, elegant cards with messages of strength and resilience. Healing doesn't require permission. Your silence saved someone. Sometimes closure looks like walking away. Elizabeth offered to feature them in her shop. To Mary's surprise, they began to sell, first 1 or 2 a day, then more as word spread about the woman who made cards with meaning. The morning of the hearing arrived with a spring thunderstorm. Mary, dressed in a simple navy dress and pearl earrings William had given her for their 30th anniversary. Elizabeth drove her to the courthouse, where Sophia waited on the steps. "Are you ready?" Sophia asked, umbrella in hand. Mary took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." As they walked inside, Mary caught sight of Jackson and Vanessa across the lobby, huddled with their attorney. Jackson looked up, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment she saw something flicker there. Anger, confusion, perhaps even shame. Then Vanessa whispered something in his ear, and his expression hardened. Mary straightened her shoulders and turned away, following Sophia toward the courtroom where she would finally speak her truth aloud. The courtroom felt smaller than Mary had imagined. Polished wood, fluorescent lights, and an atmosphere of hushed tension. She sat beside Sophia Washington at a long table, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, Jackson and Vanessa whispered with their attorney, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Judge Eleanor Ramirez, a woman in her 60s with stern eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, called the court to order. "We're here regarding case number 2487C, Parker v. Parker, petition to make temporary restraining order permanent," she announced, scanning the documents before her. "I've reviewed the submissions from both parties. Ms. Washington, you may present your client's case." Sophia stood, her burgundy suit crisp against the wood paneling. "Your Honor, my client, Mary Parker, is seeking a permanent restraining order against her son, Jackson Parker, and his wife, Vanessa Parker, following a violent assault in her home." She proceeded methodically, presenting the evidence they had carefully prepared. The medical report from Dr. Thompson documenting Mary's concussion, the photographs of Mary's injuries, and finally, the security camera footage. When the video played on the courtroom monitor, Mary couldn't watch. She kept her eyes fixed on her hands, but she could feel the collective intake of breath as the moment of impact came. The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson's attorney, Martin Green, attempted to paint the incident as an isolated outburst, the result of extreme stress and a misunderstanding. "My client acknowledges his behavior was inappropriate," Green said smoothly. "But this single regrettable moment doesn't warrant the extreme measure of a permanent restraining order against a son who has only his mother's best interests at heart." Mary felt her shoulders tense at the phrase, "best interests." How many times had Jackson justified controlling her life with those exact words? Sophia called Dr. Thompson to testify about Mary's psychological state and the impact of the assault. Amara's calm, professional demeanor gave weight to her words as she explained the symptoms of trauma Mary had been experiencing. "In your professional opinion," Sophia asked, "is Mary Parker at risk of further harm if she remains in contact with her son and daughter-in-law?" Based on the pattern of escalating control and intimidation that Mary has described, culminating in physical violence, yes, I believe she is at significant risk, Amara replied. The emotional abuse she has endured has already caused considerable psychological damage. Green objected, claiming Dr. Thompson's assessment was based solely on Mary's subjective and emotionally charged recollections. The judge overruled him, noting Dr. Thompson's extensive qualifications to make such assessments. When it was Green's turn for cross-examination, he focused on Mary's mental state. "Dr. Thompson, isn't it possible that Mrs. Parker, at her age, might be experiencing some cognitive decline that could affect her interpretation of events?" Amara's expression remained unruffled. "I found no evidence of cognitive impairment in my assessment of Mrs. Parker. Her recall is clear, and her cognitive functions are entirely normal for her age." Next, Sophia called Margaret Reynolds to the stand. The former elementary school teacher, now in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and a cardigan, had been Jackson's third-grade teacher. "Mrs. Reynolds, could you tell the court about your interactions with Jackson Parker as a child?" Sophia asked. "Jackson was a bright boy, but he had trouble controlling his temper," Margaret testified. "There were several incidents where he lashed out at classmates who refused to do what he wanted. One particularly concerning episode involved him throwing a stapler at a little girl who wouldn't give him her art supplies." Mary felt a chill run through her. She'd forgotten about that incident, or perhaps she'd chosen to forget, filing it away as a childish outburst rather than an early warning sign. "And did you maintain contact with the Parker family after Jackson left your class?" Sophia continued. "Yes. I remained friendly with Mary and William over the years. After William passed, I would occasionally meet Mary for lunch, but those meetings became less frequent after Jackson's marriage." Margaret adjusted her glasses. "The last time I saw Mary, about 2 years ago, I barely recognized her. She seemed diminished somehow, constantly checking her phone as if afraid of missing a call or text." Green objected that this was irrelevant ancient history, but Judge Ramirez allowed the testimony to continue. When it was Jackson's turn to testify, Mary finally looked directly at her son. He appeared polished and contrite in his charcoal suit, but there was something rehearsed about his remorse. "I made a terrible mistake," he said, addressing the judge. "I was under extreme pressure at work, and I snapped. I've never done anything like that before, and I'm deeply ashamed." He turned toward Mary, his expression carefully arranged into one of repentance. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I just want us to be a family again." Green guided Jackson through a series of questions designed to portray him as a concerned son worried about his aging mother's welfare. Jackson described finding Mary increasingly forgetful, making poor financial decisions, and becoming isolated. "We only wanted to protect her," he insisted. "Moving her financial management to my oversight was to prevent her from being taken advantage of. And yes, we did discuss assisted living, but only because we're concerned about her living alone as she ages." Mary felt her face flush with anger at these distortions. Sophia squeezed her hand gently under the table, a reminder to stay calm. During cross-examination, Sophia was relentless. "Mr. Parker, if you were so concerned about your mother's welfare, why was she preparing meals for you and your wife 3 times a week in her home?" Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "Mom enjoys cooking for us." "Did you ever ask her if she enjoyed it? Or did you simply expect it?" "I assumed she did." "And these financial decisions you claim your mother was making poorly, could you provide specific examples?" Jackson hesitated. "She was spending money on craft supplies for a hobby business that wasn't profitable." "Are you referring to Heartfelt by Mary, the custom stationery business your mother ran successfully for 15 years before your father's death?" "Well, yes, but the business that was featured in Craft Monthly magazine and had orders from across the state?" Jackson's facade began to crack. "That was years ago. Things had changed." Sophia nodded. "Yes, things had changed. Your mother's confidence had been systematically undermined, hadn't it?" Before Jackson could respond, Sophia played another clip from the security footage, not of the assault itself, but from an earlier dinner where Vanessa could be clearly heard belittling Mary's suggestion about redecorating the living room, calling it tragically outdated like most of your ideas. When Vanessa took the stand, her testimony was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. She painted herself as a concerned daughter-in-law trying to help an increasingly difficult mother-in-law adjust to modern life. "Mary has always been resistant to change," Vanessa said, her voice a perfect blend of concern and exasperation. "We've only tried to help her, but she takes everything as criticism." During cross-examination, Sophia asked, "Mrs. Parker, would you describe yourself as a patient person?" Vanessa smiled confidently. Very patient, especially with Mary. Then perhaps you could explain this text message you sent to your husband. Sophia handed a document to the judge and to Green. This was retrieved from the family cloud account that Mary pays for but rarely uses. The text, projected onto the courtroom screen, read, "Your mother is driving me crazy with her pathetic neediness. Either get her under control or I'm serious about looking into homes. I didn't sign up to have a servant who can't even follow simple instructions." The message was dated just 2 days before the assault. Vanessa's composure slipped momentarily. That was taken out of context. I was just venting after a difficult day. As the testimonies continued, Mary felt increasingly detached from the proceedings, as if watching a play about someone else's life. How had she not seen the pattern forming around her? The isolation, the criticism, the gradual erosion of her autonomy, all the classic signs she now recognized from Dr. Thompson's sessions and the support group. Then came the moment no one had anticipated. As Vanessa's testimony concluded, a woman rose from the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor, I have information relevant to this case." Judge Ramirez peered over her glasses. "And you are?" "Eleanor Wright, Vanessa's mother." A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. Vanessa's face drained of color. "Mother, what are you doing here?" she hissed. Judge Ramirez raised a hand for silence. "Ms. Wright, this is irregular, but I'll allow it. Please approach and be sworn in." Eleanor Wright, a dignified woman in her mid-60s with the same sharp features as her daughter but gentler eyes, took the stand. After being sworn in, she spoke with quiet determination. "I've hesitated to come forward, hoping my daughter would change her patterns of behavior. But watching this case unfold, I realized I couldn't remain silent." She turned toward Mary. "Mrs. Parker, I owe you an apology. I should have warned you about Vanessa's history." Over Green's strenuous objections, Eleanor testified about Vanessa's similar treatment of her, the emotional manipulation, the isolation from friends, the control over finances. She described how Vanessa and her first husband had moved Eleanor into their guest house, gradually taking control of her assets before attempting to have her declared incompetent after she questioned their financial decisions. "I was fortunate enough to have a neighbor who recognized what was happening and helped me get legal assistance," Eleanor concluded. "I escaped with what little remained of my savings and have had minimal contact with my daughter since. When I learned she had married again, I tried to reach out to her new mother-in-law, but Vanessa intercepted my letters." The courtroom fell silent. Jackson stared at his wife with dawning horror. Vanessa's face was a mask of cold fury. After a brief recess, Judge Ramirez returned with her decision. "Based on the compelling evidence presented today, including the documented assault, the pattern of controlling behavior, and the credible testimony regarding potential financial exploitation, I am granting the permanent restraining order." She looked directly at Jackson and Vanessa. "The respondents are to remain at least 100 yards from the petitioner at all times, with no contact via phone, email, social media, or third parties. Additionally, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential charges of elder abuse and assault." Mary felt tears well up, not from sadness, but from vindication. Someone in authority had heard her, believed her, and acted to protect her. As they exited the courtroom, Jackson called after her, his voice desperate. "Mom, please, don't do this to us." Mary paused but didn't turn around. She had nothing left to say to her son. Not today, perhaps not ever. Outside, Eleanor Wright approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Parker, Mary, I truly am sorry. If I'd found a way to warn you." Mary took the older woman's hand. "You couldn't have known, and you came forward today when it mattered most." Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. Perhaps we could have coffee sometime? I think we might have a lot to talk about." "I'd like that," Mary said softly. Two women who had survived the same storm, finding each other on the other side. The story broke the following morning in the local paper. Finance executive's mother wins restraining order after assault. The article was factual but incomplete, focusing on the dramatic moment of Eleanor Wright's testimony rather than the years of emotional abuse that had preceded the physical violence. By afternoon, regional news outlets had picked up the story, and by evening, it had gone viral on social media, spawning hashtags like #BelieveOlderWomen and Elder Abuse Survivor. Mary's phone, which she had finally turned back on, buzzed constantly with notifications and messages from journalists seeking interviews. "You don't have to speak to any of them," Sophia advised during a phone call. "Your privacy is absolutely your right." "I know," Mary replied, staring out the window of Elizabeth's shop. "But maybe my story could help someone else recognize the warning signs I missed." After careful consideration, Mary agreed to a single interview with Catherine James, a respected journalist known for her thoughtful coverage of domestic violence issues. They met at a quiet cafe, away from Mary's temporary home to maintain her privacy. "Mrs. Parker, thank you for sharing your story," Catherine began, her recorder placed discreetly between them. "Can you tell me when you first realized something was wrong in your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law?" Mary considered the question carefully. That's what makes this type of abuse so insidious. There wasn't a single moment of realization. It was 1,000 tiny cuts over years, privileges becoming expectations, suggestions becoming commands, independence becoming dependency. By the time Jackson threw that bowl at my face, I had already been diminished to the point where part of me wondered if I deserved it. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours, with Mary describing the gradual isolation, the financial control, and the emotional manipulation that had preceded the physical violence. She spoke of the support she'd found at the Women's Resource Center and the healing she'd begun through her card making. "One of the hardest things to accept," she told Catherine, "was that I had allowed it to happen. Not because I was weak, but because I loved my son and couldn't see what he was becoming. We expect monsters to look monstrous, but they often wear the faces of those we love most." The article, published the following Sunday, was titled "The Invisible Victims: Elder Abuse in Family Settings." It presented Mary's story alongside statistics about the prevalence of elder abuse and warning signs for family members to recognize. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Elizabeth's shop phone rang constantly with calls for Mary, some from other news outlets, but many from older women recognizing their own situations in Mary's story. "We need to set up a dedicated line," Elizabeth decided after the third day of disruptions, "and maybe think about how to channel all this energy constructively." While the public response was largely supportive, there were also critics who questioned Mary's account or suggested she was overreacting to family friction. Some online commenters accused her of seeking attention or trying to profit from a private family matter. More painful were the calls and emails from Jackson and Vanessa's friends and colleagues, defending them as good people who were being unfairly judged for one mistake. Several suggested that Mary was experiencing age-related confusion or had been manipulated by man-hating feminists at the Women's Center. The worst blow came when Mary learned that Jackson had given an interview to a conservative talk show host, portraying himself as a loving son concerned about his mother's mental decline, and claiming the restraining order was the result of liberal social workers interfering in family matters. "He's trying to control the narrative," Sophia explained during an emergency meeting. "It's a common tactic for abusers when they lose direct control of their victims." "Should I respond?" Mary asked, feeling sick at the thought of a public battle with her own son. Not directly, Sophia advised. The court has already ruled in your favor based on evidence, not opinions. Engaging in a media war would only dignify his distortions. Instead, Mary channeled her energy into practical matters. With Sophia's help, she arranged for a real estate agent to assess her house's value. The colonial-style home where she'd raised Jackson, where she'd lived with William, now felt tainted by recent events. "I can't go back there," she told Elizabeth. "Too many memories, both good and bad." "Are you sure?" Elizabeth asked. "It's your home. You shouldn't have to be the one to leave." "It was my home," Mary corrected gently. "Now it's just a house, and I think I need a fresh start." The real estate agent estimated the property would sell quickly in the current market, likely for significantly more than Mary had anticipated. With the proceeds, she could purchase a smaller, more manageable property and still have substantial savings for her future. While waiting for the house to sell, Mary continued staying in the apartment above Elizabeth's shop, paying a modest rent despite her friends' protests. Her card-making business, which she had tentatively restarted as therapy, began to flourish unexpectedly. The Rooted Words collection, cards featuring messages of resilience and renewal, resonated particularly with women of her generation. Orders began coming in through Elizabeth's shop, then through a simple website Margaret Reynolds's grandson helped Mary set up. "You should raise your prices," Elizabeth suggested, watching Mary carefully embossing a delicate pattern on cream cardstock. "These are artisan pieces, not mass-produced cards." Mary hesitated. "Do you think people would pay more?" "Absolutely. You're not just selling paper, Mary. You're selling affirmation, connection, beauty." Elizabeth smiled. "Things our world desperately needs more of." By the second month after the hearing, Mary had established a routine that brought her unexpected contentment. Mornings were spent on her business, creating new designs or filling orders. Afternoons often included therapy with Dr. Thompson or the support group, where she had become something of a mentor to newcomers. Evenings were for quiet dinners with Elizabeth or occasional outings with other women from the center. She had begun to rebuild her life piece by piece, like one of her intricate card designs. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered to Elizabeth's shop by courier. Mary recognized Jackson's handwriting immediately on the crisp white envelope. For a moment she considered returning it unopened, but curiosity won out. The single-page letter was written on heavy stationery, Jackson's precise handwriting filling the page. "Mom, I hope this finds you well. The past months have been difficult for all of us. Vanessa and I have separated. The publicity from the court case has damaged my professional reputation, and I've been placed on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation at the firm. Our condo is being sold to cover mounting legal fees. I realize now that I've lost everything that matters: my marriage, my career, my home. Most importantly, I've lost you. I'm writing not to ask for forgiveness, which I don't deserve, but to let you know I'm seeking help. My therapist says I need to take responsibility for my actions without expectation of reconciliation. So that's what I'm trying to do. Just talk to me, Mom. We can work this out. Your son, Jackson." Mary read the letter twice, trying to untangle her feelings. There was a part of her that ached for her son, that remembered the little boy who had once drawn her pictures and climbed into her lap for comfort. But there was another part, a stronger part now, that recognized the subtle manipulation in his words. No clear acknowledgement of what he had done, no true apology. And the final request, "Just talk to me," undermined everything that came before it, revealing the letter's true purpose: to re-establish contact and eventually control. Mary folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't respond. 3 days later, a large bouquet of flowers arrived at the shop with a card reading simply, "Please call." J. Mary asked Elizabeth to donate the flowers to a nearby nursing home. A week after that, a package arrived containing a velvet box with a pearl necklace inside, identical to one Mary's mother had given her, which had disappeared from her jewelry box months before she left home. The note read, "Found this while packing. Thought you might want it back." This, more than anything, confirmed Mary's instincts. The necklace wasn't a peace offering, but a fishing line, baited to draw her back into contact. She placed it in the safe with her other valuables, but again did not respond. Jackson's attempts at contact gradually became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Through mutual acquaintances, Mary learned he had moved to another state for a fresh start. She felt both relief and a lingering sadness, like the phantom pain from an amputated limb. 6 months after the hearing, Mary's house sold for well above asking price. After settling the remaining mortgage and paying Sophia's fees, she had a substantial sum to secure her future. With Elizabeth's encouragement, she purchased a small 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet neighborhood not far from the craft shop. The cottage, with its yellow door and white picket fence, became Mary's canvas. She painted the walls in soft blues and greens, planted a small garden of herbs and flowers, and converted the second bedroom into a studio for her growing business. On moving day, Elizabeth arrived with a group of women from the resource center, turning the occasion into a celebration. They hung curtains, arranged furniture, and filled Mary's new refrigerator with homemade dishes. "Every new home needs a proper christening," Gloria announced, producing a bottle of champagne. To Mary's fresh start. As glasses clinked and laughter filled the small living room, Mary felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. These women, most of whom she hadn't known a year ago, had become her tribe, her support system, her friends. That evening, after everyone had gone, Mary sat alone on her new porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. Her phone chimed with a text from Eleanor Wright, with whom she had developed an unexpected friendship. "Hope the move went well. Remember, a house becomes a home when you're no longer afraid in it. Sleep well, friend." Mary smiled, typing back a quick thank you. It still amazed her sometimes, the unlikely connections that had emerged from the wreckage of her previous life. As summer turned to fall, Mary's Rooted Words line expanded to include seasonal designs and custom orders. She hired a local college student, Zoe, to help with packaging and shipping as demand grew. To her surprise, Mary discovered she enjoyed mentoring the young woman, teaching her techniques and business principles. "You should teach a workshop," Zoe suggested one afternoon as they prepared a large order. "There are so many people who would love to learn from you." The idea took root. Mary approached the community center about offering a 6-week course in card-making techniques. To her astonishment, the class filled within days of being announced. Most of her students were women in their 50s and 60s, many drawn by the article about Mary's story. Some came for the craft, others for the community, and a few, Mary suspected, because they recognized elements of their own lives in hers and were seeking a way forward. During the final class, as her students proudly displayed their completed projects, Mary felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in decades. She wasn't just teaching them to make cards. She was showing them, showing herself, that it was never too late to reclaim joy. One evening, as Mary closed up her cottage studio for the night, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Parker, this is Detective Laura Rodriguez from the District Attorney's Office. I'm calling regarding the case against Jackson and Vanessa Parker." Mary's heart raced. "Yes?" "The DA has decided to move forward with charges of elder abuse and assault. We have enough evidence for an indictment, but we'd need your testimony for the strongest case." Mary sat down heavily. "Criminal charges? I thought the restraining order was the end of it." "That was a civil matter," Detective Rodriguez explained. These would be criminal proceedings. Elder abuse is taken very seriously in our jurisdiction, Mrs. Parker. The evidence in your case is compelling. What would happen to Jackson if he's convicted? For first-time offenders, typically probation, mandatory counseling, community service. In more severe cases or with prior offenses, jail time is possible. Mary thought of Jackson's letter, his attempt at therapy. Perhaps he was truly trying to change. Would criminal charges help that process or hinder it? Would they bring her closure or simply prolong her pain? "Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course. This is entirely your decision, Mrs. Parker. Take whatever time you need." Mary barely slept that night, wrestling with conflicting emotions. The next day, she called Dr. Thompson for an emergency session. "There's no right or wrong decision here, Mary," Amara said after listening carefully. "The question is, what do you need for your own healing?" Mary considered this. "I don't want vengeance. I just wanted to be safe, to rebuild my life. And I'm doing that. But part of me feels responsible. If Jackson isn't held accountable, what if he does this to someone else? What if Vanessa finds another vulnerable person to exploit?" Amara nodded. "That's a valid concern. However, you're not responsible for their future actions. You can only make the choice that's right for you, now." After much soul-searching, Mary called Detective Rodriguez with her decision. "I won't testify in criminal proceedings. I found my peace, and I don't want to reopen these wounds." The detective sounded disappointed but respectful. "I understand, Mrs. Parker. If you change your mind, the option remains open for some time." Mary felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had chosen her path forward, one that prioritized her healing over punishment. It wasn't a decision everyone would understand, but it was hers to make. 1 year to the day after the bowl had shattered against her cheek, Mary stood before an audience at a fundraising gala for the Women's Resource Center. Her silver hair was styled in a becoming bob, her navy blue dress simple but elegant. The small scar on her cheekbone was barely visible now, a faint line that caught the light when she turned her head. "When I first came to this center," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I was broken in ways I couldn't even name. I had lost myself so gradually I hadn't noticed the disappearance." The room was silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on her as she shared her journey. Not just the dramatic moments of violence and escape, but the slow, painful process of rebuilding an identity after decades of erosion. "Recovery isn't a straight line," she explained. "It's a spiral, bringing you back to the same difficult places, but at a different level each time. Some days, I still hear those critical voices in my head, telling me I'm overreacting, being dramatic, making a fuss over nothing. The difference is, now I recognize them for what they are, echoes, not truth." She spoke of the resources that had saved her, the legal aid, the counseling, the support groups, and the unexpected gift of community she had found. "I lost a son," she acknowledged, her voice finally breaking. "That grief will always be part of me, but I gained sisters, mentors, friends. I rediscovered my passion, my voice, my worth." As applause filled the room, Mary spotted Eleanor Wright in the audience, nodding and understanding. Beside her sat Margaret Reynolds, Elizabeth, Gloria, and other women from her expanding circle. Each had played a role in her resurrection, though the hardest work had been her own. The gala raised over $150,000 for the center's programs, double the previous year's total. Mary's story, combined with her growing reputation as an artisan and teacher, had drawn donors eager to support similar transformations for other women. Later that evening, as Mary prepared for bed in her peaceful cottage, she received a text from Zoe. "Just got the call. We got the contract. The department store wants 500 rooted words cards for their spring collection. Mary smiled, excitement bubbling through her. Their small business was growing beyond anything she'd imagined. From therapy to passion project to viable enterprise. Another unexpected gift from the wreckage of her past life. She moved to her desk and opened the bottom drawer where she kept Jackson's letter. She hadn't read it in months, but something about this anniversary made her want to measure the distance she had traveled. Reading it now, she could see the manipulation that had once been invisible to her, the self-pity disguised as remorse, the subtle shifting of responsibility, the hook at the end designed to draw her back into his orbit. The words no longer had power over her. Mary returned the letter to its drawer. Then, on a fresh sheet of her finest cardstock, she began to write, not to Jackson, but to herself. A letter to the woman she had been a year ago, frightened and uncertain in Elizabeth's apartment. Dear Mary, you don't know me yet, but I am the woman you will become. I want to tell you that the path ahead is harder than you can imagine, but also more rewarding. You will lose things you thought were essential. You will gain things you never knew to want. The hardest lesson will be learning to trust yourself again, your perceptions, your judgments, your worth. There will be days when you falter, when the old doubts creep back in. On those days, remember this. You were right. What happened to you was wrong. You deserved better. Your hands still hold magic. Your heart still holds love. Your mind still holds wisdom. These things cannot be taken from you unless you surrender them. Don't look back, except to see how far you've come. With love and pride, the woman you are becoming. She sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in her keepsake box. Perhaps someday she would share it with another woman at the beginning of her own journey. For now, it was enough to know how far she had traveled from that broken woman with a bleeding cheek and shaking hands. Mary turned out the light and slipped between cool sheets, listening to the gentle rhythm of rain on her roof. Tomorrow would bring new cards to create, new students to teach, new moments to savor. Tonight, she would rest in the home she had made for herself, a sanctuary built not of walls and windows, but of boundaries, courage, and hard-won peace. Spring arrived with a riot of color in Mary's small garden. Daffodils nodded in the breeze, tulips stood at attention along the walkway, and delicate crocuses pushed through the last patches of melting snow. Mary sat on her porch swing, coffee mug warming her hands, watching a pair of cardinals flit among the budding branches of her maple tree. 2 years had passed since that fateful dinner. 2 years of rebuilding, recovering, reinventing. Her business, now officially renamed Rooted Words by Mary, had expanded to supply cards to 3 department store chains and dozens of independent gift shops across the region. She had hired 2 more part-time assistants besides Zoe, who was now her full-time business manager. The cottage had evolved as well, with the addition of a sunroom studio similar to the one William had built for her decades ago. Here, Mary taught small workshops twice a month, showing others the techniques she had perfected over a lifetime of card making. Her phone chimed with a text from Elizabeth. "Don't forget dinner tonight, bringing that writer from National Arts Journal who wants to interview you." Mary smiled, typing back a quick acknowledgement. The interview request had come after a feature in a regional magazine about women entrepreneurs over 60 had gone viral. At 67, Mary had become something of an unlikely inspiration for women seeking reinvention in their later years. As she prepared for her day, Mary reflected on how much her life had changed. The nightmares had faded to occasional shadows. The anxiety that had once been her constant companion now appeared only in specific situations, large crowds, unexpected loud noises, certain phrases that triggered memories of Vanessa's cutting remarks. Dr. Thompson called this progress, not perfection. "Healing doesn't mean forgetting," she often reminded Mary. It means the memories no longer control you. Mary still attended the support group, though now more often as a mentor than a participant. She had developed a particular talent for helping newcomers name their experiences, find their voices, and begin envisioning futures beyond abuse. Today, however, was not a group day. Today was Mary's standing appointment at Harmony House, a women's shelter on the other side of town where she volunteered teaching card making as therapy. The residents, women of all ages escaping domestic violence, found healing in creating beautiful things with their hands, just as Mary had. She gathered her supplies, carefully packing specialty papers, tools, and embellishments. These sessions required particular sensitivity. Some women couldn't handle scissors yet due to shelter safety protocols. Others were triggered by certain colors or images associated with their abuse. Mary had learned to adapt her teaching accordingly, finding creative workarounds that respected each woman's journey. As she drove to the shelter, Mary's mind wandered to the news Elizabeth had shared last week. Jackson had remarried, a woman he'd met in his therapy group. Mary had felt a complex mix of emotions at the information: concern for this unknown woman, hope that Jackson had truly changed, relief that his life had continued its trajectory away from hers. She had not spoken to her son since the courtroom almost 2 years ago. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she wondered if reconciliation might someday be possible. Not now, perhaps not for years, but someday. Not a return to what was, that could never happen, but perhaps the cautious building of something new if Jackson could demonstrate genuine change over time. Mary parked outside Harmony House, pushing these thoughts aside to focus on the women waiting inside. Today's project was especially meaningful. Message cards, where each woman would create a card containing words she needed to hear, either from others or from herself. Sometimes we wait for permission or validation that never comes, Mary explained to the circle of women. These cards are about giving yourself what you need, recognizing your own authority to affirm your experiences and choices. As the women worked, Mary circulated, offering technical advice and gentle encouragement. A young mother of 3 struggled with her message, pen hovering uncertainly over the paper. "I can't think of what to write," she confessed when Mary paused beside her. "What words do you most need to hear right now?" Mary asked softly. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "That it wasn't my fault, that I was right to leave, that I'm not ruining my kids' lives by keeping them from their father." Mary nodded. Those sound like powerful truths that need to be acknowledged. With trembling hands, the young woman began to write, tears falling onto the cardstock but not smudging the ink. Mary moved on, giving her privacy for this intimate act of self-validation. By the end of the session, each woman had created a personal talisman, words of power housed in beauty. Some chose to share their messages, others kept them private, but all left with something tangible to remind them of their own wisdom and worth. As Mary packed up her supplies, the shelter director approached. "The women look forward to your sessions all week," she said. "You have a gift for meeting them exactly where they are." "I've been where they are," Mary replied simply. "I just try to be the person I needed when I was in their shoes." That evening, as promised, Elizabeth arrived for dinner with Claudia Morales, the arts journalist. They sat in Mary's garden, enjoying a simple meal of spring salad and roasted chicken as the sunset painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Claudia's questions were thoughtful, focused less on the trauma of Mary's past and more on the artistry of her present. She asked about techniques, inspiration, the meaning behind various card designs, and the business model that had proven so successful. "Your rooted words card seemed to strike a particular chord," Claudia observed, examining one of Mary's recent creations. "Your silence saved someone. That's a powerful message." Mary nodded. Many of us learn to be silent as a survival mechanism. It's important to recognize that choice for what it was. Not weakness, but strategy. Not failure, but protection. And now, Claudia asked, having found your voice, what do you most want to say with it? Mary considered the question, watching a hummingbird hover near her feeder. That it's never too late to begin again. That healing isn't linear or finite. It's a practice, a daily choosing of yourself. She smiled. And that sometimes the most beautiful creations emerge from what appears to be irreparable damage. After Claudia left, Elizabeth helped Mary clear the dishes. You know, Elizabeth said, loading the dishwasher, when you first came to the center that day, I never imagined this outcome. I hoped you'd be safe, but this... She gestured around the cottage, the garden, the studio. This is beyond what anyone could have expected. I certainly didn't expect it, Mary admitted. I just wanted to stop being afraid in my own home. And now? Mary smiled, gazing out at her garden where fireflies had begun to appear, their gentle lights blinking like earthbound stars. Now I'm not just unafraid. I'm alive, truly alive, perhaps for the first time in decades. Later, alone in her cottage, Mary prepared for bed with her usual routine, a cup of chamomile tea, her gratitude journal, a few minutes of meditation. As she wrote in her journal, listing the day's blessings, her pen lingered over the final entry. Grateful for second chances, even at 67. She closed the journal and turned out the light, settling into the peaceful darkness. Tomorrow she would teach another class, design more cards, perhaps plant those tomato seedlings Zoe had brought her. Simple pleasures, ordinary days, the quiet miracle of a life reclaimed. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, nourishing the garden she had planted drop by patient drop, just as she had rebuilt herself. With care, with time, with the stubborn certainty that growth was possible, even after the harshest winter.